Hello, true believers, and welcome to another edition of BK's Bullets. My name is not Brent Casina. My name is Jim Afanis, and from time to time, I do comic book based television show reviews for Brent. Is that not a mouthful? Today, I'll be talking to you guys about Black Lightning season number 3. So before I get into the nitty gritty of the episode, I'm not going to spoil anything. I'm going to talk about things in generalities. I assume by this point you've at least somewhat familiar with who Black Lightning is and at least understand where the show is right now in season 3, or where it was, I should say. I did this review for Arrow. Arrow, definitely my favorite CW show. I love the show so much, so I felt like I had to do a send off to it. But Black Lightning is really finding its stride, in my opinion. There's definitely a lot of really cool story elements this season, and again, I'm not going to get into spoilers. I'm just going to give you guys my overall impression of season 3. So, without giving too much away, it's very clear that as season 3 enters into the show, things are very, very different. There's been a basic takeover of Freeland, and it has a lot to do with this shadowy government organization and their nonstop pursuit of metahumans. So when the show really started, you think back to it, Black Lightning was kind of a one-off in the sense that there weren't a lot of other people that had powers. Very quickly, they began to add more and more and more people. By the end of the season, there is quite a cast of people who have powers. As a matter of fact, most of the major characters have powers at that point. So it kind of does diminish Black Lightning's importance. That's something that I feel Arrow always did a very good job of, and that it was grounded as much as it could be, in the sense that Ollie never really went up against people who had ridiculous amounts of power. Outside of Damon Dark, for the most part, it was just person versus person. There's a lot of mental games and that sort of thing. Black Lightning, though, really pushes that meta power struggle, really. Everybody seems to have some sort of ability. It's not really clear who is the strongest. It's a lot of times it's implied that it's Black Lightning, but I happen to think that his daughter Lightning is actually significantly more powerful than he is, and even the Thunder seems to be able to hold her own very well. However, what ends up happening is, again, not getting into spoilers, this military takeover of the city, and the show starts off in a very weird place because back to episode 1 of season 3. Largely because there's not really a clear explanation as to what's happening. A lot of characters that were presumed dead, and there are more than one, suddenly are up and walking around, and it's not really clear as to how they came to be. It's not clear if it's a rewind in time or some sort of alternate history or something like that. Thankfully, if you do stick with it, the show does begin to make much more sense, and it is much more clear as to what is happening and why it is happening. To me, the best story arc of anybody this season had to be Painkiller. Recall that Painkiller was just a normal guy, Khalil. He gets shot in the back. He basically becomes crippled, and then he seemingly dies at the end of season 2. And before you know it, he's up and around in season 3, walking around. And not only is he walking and talking, he is a certified badass assassin who really can just hold his own and numerous times goes up against a lot of the crew and soundly wins in one-on-one fights. His story arc this season I thought was very, very incredible. Now, there were a lot of weird things happening. Particularly, there was a lot of issues with the Markovians, and some of the B plots, if you want to think of it that way, didn't really seem to pan out the way that I thought that they should. By the end, looking at the end of season 3, they do successfully wrap up everything that I think they needed to wrap up. As always, there's a few little Easter eggs and a few little what-ifs moving into the next season. However, I think largely everything does kind of wrap itself up in a nice bow, and we do have some clear understanding of characters' motivations. We have clear understanding of characters' intentions and kind of what happens to everybody. If you were to make a spreadsheet and say, what happened to Black Lightning? What happened to this person? You are able to understand it. They also added a quite a large crew this season, and I think it had mixed results. There are a lot of new characters that are added that are very quickly brought into the fold, very quickly read in, so to speak, in terms of where they're kind of where the secret base is and what everybody's up to. And oh, by the way, I'm really Jefferson Pierce. I'm also Black Lightning. Like, hey, what's up? It's kind of odd that they just so quickly were brought in. Particularly, I noticed this on a lot of these CW shows. They just can't keep their mouth shut. Like, everybody's telling everybody, hey, I have powers. Hey, I'm this. Hey, I'm part of this secret organization. Join us. And what ends up happening is you get a lot of these B stories with characters that you just met, and the stakes are high for that character. I think they did a good job framing it. Ultimately, though, you just don't care as much because you just don't care about that character. And it just kind of feels like, well, I don't want them to die. However, I don't really care if they get kidnapped. It's not as big of a deal as, say, like Lightning or Thunder. If something happened to them, they're, to me, the main cast. Or Gamby. Those are characters that I really care about. So they have this problem where they feel like they need to fill stuff in, and I think as a whole, CW can do a better job of wrapping in episodes, making them a little bit tighter. It doesn't necessarily have to be, 30 episodes long or however long a season is. They could easily truncate that and get to more clear and concise stories. And that's not to say we don't need to develop new characters. That's absolutely part of these characters' journeys. And the trials and tribulations of what Jefferson Pierce goes through on a personal level does impact more than just his immediate family. So I do understand that you're going to need to have that, that network of other characters, but it just seems to go on a little bit too long. There's also some really cool villains that are introduced this season. By far, my absolute favorite, on top of Painkiller, is well, I don't want to give the spoilers. You know what? I was just going to tell you, and I don't want to tell you. You'll be surprised. There's some really cool people that come in with really interesting powers that have a really cool ability kind of later on that really does kind of mix up the action. And I think ultimately it does well. Characters that you thought were gone somehow make triumphant appearances. There are definitely a lot of deaths at the end of the season. And I wasn't aware, honestly. I don't follow Hollywood news. So I'm not really sure in terms of what happens with, I don't follow the daily gossip or this actor has announced he or she is leaving. However, I was surprised after finding out who died, Googling it right away, like what happened to so-and-so, and seeing, oh, this person's leaving the show, this person wasn't asked back, whatever. So based on when those timelines came out, this was well before the season was over. So for me, being in a vacuum, so to speak, in terms of Hollywood news and actors and what's going on there, it really does lend itself well to the show, because I was totally shocked when people were like, oh my God, they just killed this person. Like, why would they do that? So this battle with the Markovians and with the A.S.A., which is this, this corrupt government agency, the American Security Agency, it does play itself out, but it does have some impact because people's lives are changed. This is the first season also that included a little bit of a crossover. They did it in a very interesting way. It wasn't as traditional like Arrow or Batgirl or Batwoman or Supergirl or any of that. This was basically just two characters from the show are basically put in snapshots of alternate reality. And I thought it was done well. I would like to see more of a traditional crossover with them maybe in the future. Definitely now that they're folded in, you will hear a lot of other cities, particularly Gotham City, a lot in this season. I liked that. I thought that was interesting. So I think it's in a good place. I really feel like it found its stride. I would argue this is, despite the fact that there's some nonsense with this weird city takeover, and you kind of have to wrap your head around, why is nobody doing anything about this? Once you kind of start to understand that, I think it does lend itself better, but it does take a while. I definitely recall sitting on the couch with my wife numerous times, turning to her going, I'm done with this. If this episode doesn't explain anything, I'm out. And then they'd give me just a little breadcrumb that would lead me on a little bit more. So I don't mind being in the dark as a viewer. I don't mind not knowing every single thing about every single character the second they're on screen. It's just it needs to be a little bit faster. Although, when you do look back at the season holistically and you look at the death of some of these characters and you look at what happens to the city and what happens to the people we know, I think ultimately the season is a definite success. Much more positive than negative. Not to say it can't be better, but it definitely seems to refine itself very well. So I'm excited for season 4. I'm not really sure what's going to happen now, particularly with this COVID thing going around right now. There's a good chance it's going to be delayed like everything else is. But I thought I would give this show at least my own little slice of internet heaven, or Brent's little slice of internet heaven, and say good job to the cast and the crew of Black Lightning. You found a way to take a very basic PG show and really turn up certain elements in a very aggressive way. And I thought it was very meaningful. So I liked it. So there you guys have it. Just a quick overview of Black Lightning Season 3. I don't think I'll do episode-to-episode review. I talked about this before when I was reviewing the Arrow show, the whole series, essentially. There's just too many things going on in a normal week for me to get to it. But I think you could expect reviews from me. I'm about 4 episodes behind right now on Batwoman. So when I get caught up on that and we get to that season finale, you may expect another video from me. So look forward to that. Thank you guys so much for watching. Do Brent a favor, comment, rate, subscribe. Tell us all the wonderful things you liked about Black Lightning and the greater comic book world as a whole. That's all for me. Thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves. And until next time, I will see you guys in the funny pages.